All right, well, with that, why don't I give it to you, Mike? Let me get it set up here because I do want to make sure that the slides make their way to the recording. Bear with me a moment. It's always a little tricky with Zoom. I think we're good.
You're good? Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, hi, everybody. My name is Mike Crowley, and as Michael said, I manage the commercial and industrial portfolio for Efficiency Vermont. So I'll provide an overview first of who we are at Efficiency Vermont. I'm assuming a lot of you probably are familiar with us. And then I will get into one of the services that we offer, which is energy management planning. We call it strategic energy management. I think which will dovetail nicely with the capital planning presentation we just had. So first of all, is everybody here familiar with Efficiency Vermont? Anybody not familiar? Great. Has anybody done a project with us recently? Excellent, great. So who we are, we're the statewide efficiency utility. We were founded back in 2001. We were actually the very first energy efficiency utility in the country. So Vermont invented this model. The idea is that we are funded in part by the energy efficiency charge on your electric bill. We also have funding through the forward capacity market through RGGI. And we utilize those funds to reduce the cost of energy for all of Vermonters. So we're focused on families in the residential market as well as the commercial market. And I manage the commercial market. And we're also focused on not only just energy use, but greenhouse gas reductions as well. So how do we do that? We provide direct support through incentives. We also have a pretty robust technical service, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And the organizing idea for us really is about market transformation. So similar to the vision for a capital plan, we look at the whole state and we say, what would the world look like if we're successful? And how do we work ourselves out of a job to get there? So we start with looking at a range of technologies and markets and identify where is the end state that we want to get to, and then we have long-term plans ourselves, thinking about how we can move the market toward that state. But we obviously can't do that alone. We work with a lot of people across the whole supply chain, distributors, contractors, manufacturers, and of course, customers as well. And then we partner with the distribution utilities across the state as well. So just some of the impacts that we've had over the last 23 years or so. We track all of this very closely. So we're looking at about $3 billion in lifetime savings over that time period. So we look at the whole life cycle of the equipment costs as well. We've avoided about 13 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's about 2.8 million cars equivalent on the road. We also were very proud of the fact that our utility bills are lower in Vermont, 38% lower than the national average. The job market for energy efficiency in the state is pretty robust. We have a lot of folks across that supply chain that we support. And then we have our efficiency excellence network. This is a network of contractors that work with us, that we provide trainings to, that we recommend out in the market if you're doing a project. So just some of that economic value of efficiency. So energy efficiency does comprise about 15% of our electric portfolio. And by that, when we're looking at the efficiency utility model, we look at it kind of in the same way that a generator of electricity would contribute to the energy supply. So, but we're just on the demand side. So we're reducing that demand. So we've been able to reduce that demand pretty significantly, and we can do that at just 75% of the cost of actually purchasing new power. So for example, some of these examples here, 5.32 cents per kilowatt hour is the cost of saving electricity with efficiency. versus 7.4 cents per kilowatt hour to supply that electricity. So we see that this makes, a lot of economic sense for the state. Okay, so getting into a little bit more detail in terms of what we do on the commercial side. So we break this out into two different service delivery areas. One is what we call our prescriptive offers. So this includes point of sale rebates with distributors. So if you are contracting with a contractor, they'll go to their distributor like an FW Web or a Granite Group to actually purchase the equipment. We have partnerships with those distributors, and they provide a point of sale discount at right at the point of sale. So it's really seamless for our customer. We do, require that contractors put that on the invoice so you can see where the incentive was. But that's probably that's where we do a lot of volume, just working directly with those distributors. So we're able to reduce the cost of the energy efficiency equipment compared to standard efficiency equipment right there at the point of sale. We also offer online or mail-in after purchase rebate forms. We call this downstream. So if you purchase something online or you work with a contractor that did not purchase something through our distributor network, but it still qualifies as our, on our qualified products list, you can very easily just provide us the invoice, basic information about what you purchased, and then we'll mail you a check. So some of the technologies that we support through our prescriptive offers, we do building envelope work. So this is maybe more of a custom side, but we'll work with you if you have like a wood frame structure, you're doing a retrofit of that wood frame structure. We can provide incentives for air sealing and insulation. On the HVAC side, you've probably heard a lot about heat pumps over the last couple of years. Vermont is definitely a leader in heat pump installation. In fact, we just had a press release a couple of weeks ago that we have the highest number of heat pump installations per capita in the country. And that's a big part of the electrification work that we're doing across the state. It's a big part of our greenhouse gas reduction strategy. The more we can electrify, we're reducing those point source pollution areas. So your boilers are emitting directly into the atmosphere. If you can convert that to electricity, then it significantly reduces the greenhouse gas emissions from that equipment. We have a pretty robust commercial refrigeration equipment program as well, and we're working with the Agency of Natural Resources. We have some funds through them to replace aging refrigeration equipment, help with refrigerant leaks, because refrigerants are a very, very potent greenhouse gas, orders of magnitude greater than carbon dioxide. And we're switching to more natural, we call them natural refrigerants that have a much lower global warming potential. In fact, there is going to be a rule change coming in 2025 where you'll no longer be able to purchase refrigeration equipment with higher GWP refrigerants. So we're doing a lot of planning around that. We have a pretty significant agriculture program as well. We work with farms all over the state for things like dairy plate coolers and upgrading their lighting, their dairy barn fans, that type of thing. And then we started a new program actually during the pandemic to support commercial kitchens. One of the things we wanted to do during the pandemic was to support sectors that were getting hit particularly hard, and commercial kitchens certainly were. So we have a great program right now. It's again one of those midstream programs where when you go to a participating distributor, they'll provide a point of sale rebate for qualified products. We're also this year looking to pilot a couple fully electric kitchens. So which is kind of a new thing, but it's definitely something that is gaining a lot of traction across the country. So that's on the prescriptive side. It's really easy. You just get if you work through a contractor, you get that instant off rebate, or you can mail it in. But then in our custom program, or in our commercial program, we also have what we call our custom program. So we have a whole team of account managers and energy consultants that are ready and willing to work with you. I'm sure a lot of you have probably worked with some folks from our team. And what they'll do is they'll work hand in hand with you to identify projects in your towns and cities, and then determine what what we can provide for incentives kind of on a project by project basis. So there are a lot of opportunities that are not captured in our prescriptive programs that are unique to individual facilities. So that's why it's called custom, because we're going to do a custom program. We also offer what we call structured custom programs, because often what happens is we'll go into a facility, we'll look around, identify where the opportunities are, and then we'll go back and calculate the energy savings, and we'll come back with an incentive offer. To make that a little bit easier, there are certain technologies that will say, we'll guarantee this incentive amount, and then we do the calculation on the back end. I should say part of the way that we're structured, we have an order of appointment with the state of Vermont, and we get paid based on the amount of energy reduction that we see in the state. So we look at megawatt hour reduction, we look at reductions in millions of British thermal units for fossil fuel equipment. We have, I think it's about 15 different quantitative performance indicators that we manage in our contract. So some of the services that we do in our custom program, we'll work with you on commercial new construction. And I was just saying earlier that the commercial building energy standards, the building code, there's a new one going into effect in July of this year. It's pretty different. And it's getting more stringent in terms of the energy requirements. Then looking out to 2030, the energy code is essentially going to be net zero. So what that means is we look at the energy utilization index. We say, okay, this is how much energy you're using per square foot. And the building code says you have to meet a certain threshold. And by saying net zero or net zero ready, and this is where it gets into solar, if you build the building to that standard, then it's pretty easy then to supplement with renewables to get you to a completely net zero building. But that commercial energy code, like I said, it's getting a little bit harder. And so we want to work with you all if you have new construction projects or deep retrofit projects that kind of falls into that category as well. We offer pretty significant design assistance as well. So if you want to do an energy audit, if you want to do something like energy modeling, we can provide an incentive for that. It's basically like a grant. We'll say, if you're undertaking this study, we'll provide a pretty significant portion of those costs. I'm going to skip down this list a little bit. Retrofit lighting, the reason that's in our custom program is one of our longest standing programs. We called it the Smart Light program. It was part of our prescriptive offer. There was an act that was passed, Act 120, back in 2022. That banned the sale of 4-foot linear fluorescent bulbs. These are all LEDs in here, I think. But the reason that was significant for us is that constituted our baseline to incentivize lighting projects. So we'd say, okay, baseline is fluorescence. To get you to LEDs, we're going to provide an incentive to help you with the additional cost to get to that point. But now you can't buy a 4-foot linear fluorescent bulb in the state. The reason it was passed is because the fluorescent bulbs contain mercury. And so obviously we don't want mercury in our facilities. It's a dangerous heavy metal. So when I think about market transformation, that's one of the ways the market can be transformed is through legislation. So what that means for supporting lighting projects now is that we can no longer provide that Smart Light program through distributors, but we can work with you directly through our custom program to retrofit your lighting. We negotiated with the Department of Public Service on this way forward because we realized the intent of the legislation is to get those bulbs out of facilities. So we're still we can still work with you to get them out of the facilities, but we just have to do it on a project by project basis. So open to any questions if that doesn't make sense to folks. We also do what we call flexible load management. This is where we partner with the distribution utilities pretty heavily. So this is a way for the state to have more resilience in the electrical grid. As we're seeing more and more renewables come online in the state, that means that the demand curve on the grid is actually changing. So it used to be that the peak demand was around 5 or 6 o'clock when people come home from work. That's actually changed with working from home. but the energy supply for renewables tends to be at a different time of day. So what that means for the grid is we need to modernize the grid through a lot of different strategies, including energy storage. Flexible load management is a way to do that at a facility level. What we'll do is we'll work with the distribution utilities, we work with controls contractors, and we can adjust your load depending on what the peak energy is on the grid. So if you're interested in doing something like that, please talk to me. We're doing this on a project by project basis. It's kind of a pilot mode right now that's been going on for the last 3 or 4 years. Okay, but the thing I wanted to talk about next is how we can work with you on looking at your entire municipal campus. And one of the ways that we do that is through our program that we call Strategic Energy Management. And Strategic Energy Management is kind of an industry term. There is a Department of Energy standard, there's an ISO standard called 50001, and then the Department of Energy has an entire program to help facilities meet that standard. It's called 50001 Ready. So we've modeled our program based on that DOE program. But essentially, the way that we'll work with you, and I'll get into the details a bit, but we can scale it to whatever your needs are. The basic idea is we'll help you identify what your energy target would be in your town or city, and then develop an energy management plan that the same kind of idea of backwards mapping, say this is where you want to be, and then these are the investments you need to make to get to that energy use. And we'll help you with the return on investment and all that good stuff. Energy treasure hunts right above strategic energy management here is one of the things that we do as part of that work. We'll walk through your facility. So I'll get into those details right now. Okay, so what is strategic energy management? This is from the Consortium for Energy Efficiency. They have these kind of minimal elements to look at, but very similar to how you do capital planning. You start with looking at, okay, what is your organizational commitment? So what are some policies or goals that you might form? So it might be that you want to hit a certain energy utilization index, or you want to hit a certain energy threshold. And we really encourage that comes from the top. So it's kind of a policy that everybody can align to. And then you get into, okay, how are we going to get there? So there's a lot of work that goes into that. Basically mapping out your energy uses across your town, identifying kind of your metrics and goals for each of those energy use areas, engaging employees. So there's a lot of work that can go into that planning and implementation. And then once you start implementing energy projects, we need a performance system so that you're kind of staying on track with those goals. So essentially what all this means is we do this commit, plan, do, act, check type of work. And so that's part of that ongoing planning cycle that never ends, right? Oops. Okay, so getting into those details a little bit. So making that commitment, we really start by adopting a formal energy policy and then sharing that message with everybody in the town. And you want to include, a commitment to setting and meeting those goals. So it's not just here's the goal, but here's how we're committing to doing it. We then typically recommend that we have a cross-functional energy team. I know a lot of towns have energy committees. I live in Middlesex. I'm about to join my energy committee finally, but that's a really good source for helping with this. They're usually very committed people within within those energy committees. And then working across all of the staff that need to be part of the actual implementation for that energy goal. And then when you start to plan the improvements, essentially what we want to do is draft that energy management plan that identifies on a line item, and this can be integrated right into your capital plan. What are the specific energy investments you want to make? And then, and we all usually look at that return on investment. So we look at your economics around those investments. So the way that we typically start doing that is through what we call an energy treasure hunt. We do this with a lot of the larger industrial customers across the state. It's been pretty successful. But what we'll do is kind of get the right stakeholders together. Kind of, this could even be similar to how you're walking around, identifying all your assets. You just walk around your facilities, identify low or no cost energy savings. Then you can identify, okay, what are the larger capital projects that you want to invest in? And then how are you going to engage staff with those projects? So the way that we look at this typically is in this pyramid. So we'll start by, what are the large capital upgrades? So it might be, that you have an aging boiler in a building. It might be a fossil fuel boiler. So that's at the end of its useful life. So we could help you upgrade or replace that boiler to a biomass boiler, for example. And then we look at process improvement. So one of the big things that we find when we do these energy treasure hunts is just identifying equipment that's running when it shouldn't be running. And the best way to save energy is to turn something off. It's really simple and it has a really quick payback. Maintenance, I'm sure you all have preventative maintenance that you're looking at. So, where are those preventative maintenance priorities and how's that going to help? If you prioritize one type of preventative maintenance, how is it going to help with your overall energy goals? And then employee engagement is really important. Getting everybody involved, even if it's just, shutting things off, getting people into that habit, or even investing in building controls that can turn it off on a schedule for you. But even those building controls, they can be overridden, right? So you need to get everybody involved in that planning. So the energy treasure hunts, I just took this from the DOE, but it actually is really fun. If you're interested in doing it, we could talk to you about setting up an event. It's usually an all day long event, and we'll just walk around, we'll identify where the opportunities are. And then what we'll typically do is just provide a quadrant, right? So we'll classify each idea as a big win, an easy win, a project that we're going to do, or something we're going to do later. So we look at that as the potential energy savings, the level of effort, or the cost, and then you can start to prioritize where you want to make those investments. And then at the end of the treasure hunt, then you can start developing your plan. And this is where we can help with incentives. So identifying what that end goal is, identifying all the investments that you want to make to get to that end goal. You're going to find that you're probably not going to get to those payback thresholds that you really want. So that's where we can step in. We can provide custom incentives for you. If you have a 5-year plan, we can work with you on a 5-year schedule and say, maybe we can front load some heavier investments up front to get some of those harder projects done, and then we can work with you on kind of reinvesting into those energy improvements. So we're here to help with financing these projects. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. So just to summarize what we can do with strategic energy management, we'll help you define and measure progress toward a goal. We'll help you create that energy management plan, including that prioritized list of projects. We'll provide incentives to help you with those paybacks. And then we can help you kind of adopt energy management best practices throughout your facilities. All right.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
Hey, Carrie, I think you set you up here. So we'll move from inside the building to potentially on top of the building or adjacent to the building. Let's see.
So I was doing that. I just want to apologize for my face. I didn't get really sunburned watching the eclipse. I'm doing a dermatology treatment, bad timing for public speaking, but motivate you all to wear sunscreen. So my name is Carrie Fenn. I'm a commercial and industrial solar specialist at SunCommon, and we are really excited about this next phase of renewable energy in the United States based on the Inflation Reduction Act. So I'm going to talk a little bit about SunCommon, what we do, siting for solar, and then a case study with the Charlottetown garage that we just completed. Just
oh, you know what? It's because it's not on the view.
okay, sorry.
Apologies. This will be Eric.
Great. So SunCommon is most of you have probably seen our cars driving around. We're a Vermont-based solar company. We've been in business about 10 years, and we were created as a market solution to climate change. So we believe that everyone has a right to a healthy environment and a brighter future, and renewable energy is where it starts. Couple projects that we have here, you can see the top, you're right, is Champlain College. That was a project that we recently completed in South Burlington, or in Burlington, on a rubber membrane roof, and then a typical asphalt shingle roof installation. So with solar siting, what we're really looking for are east, west, or south facing roofs. We like to have roofs that are free of obstructions, and then also nothing really encumbering the sunshine from about 60 feet. So trees, other buildings, you know, we really need a little bit of space, not a ton of space, but it's nice to have a pretty clear view of the sun. Asphalt shingle, rubber membrane, standing seam are all great roofs. Corrugated is also, you can do corrugated. Those typically, you know, we'll see those on town garages quite often. Slate is not an option. We like to have pretty new roofs within the last 15 years, mainly because you don't want to get into a situation where pretty soon after the installation, we have to take everything off to replace the roof. One really nice thing about solar is that it is a really good roof protector. So if you do have a new asphalt shingle roof, that roof will last longer with solar on it because it's really protected from the elements. Structurally, we like to see, or we need to see 2 to 10 pounds per square foot additional on that structural capacity. So a lot of pre-engineered buildings won't qualify for solar because they're not typically built to have additional pounds per square foot availability, but that's something that we work with a structural engineer to make sure that you get a certification. And then we also love wide open parking lots. So if you got a big parking lot, we can put a canopy on there and produce a ton of energy. This particular project that we're looking at is the St. Albans Town Education Center. Cool. It was a great project. It was at the time that it was built, one of the largest rooftop solar arrays in the state of Vermont, and no cost to the taxpayers. Just a really cool project. So Vermont net metering we're actually, I think, maybe the first state to establish net metering in the US. And the way that net metering works is that you're producing power, the power goes out to the grid, the utility credits your account for the production, and you don't have to use it in real time. So net metering basically means you get to bank the extra credits that you're not using in real time. We have the solar arc, so in the wintertime, you're not really producing that much. As the days get longer, as the sun gets higher, as the snow starts to go away, we really start to see that those solar credits peak, and then they start to drop again. The credits that you produce when you're producing more than you're using, get used during the wintertime and at night. So they're banking those credits, they're drawing them down when you're not producing as much solar. Yeah.
I heard that something was changing this year with the regulatory standards that was going to make this harder, and we had to sort of hurry and some stuff.
Well, there was a permitting change that happened on March 1st, basically just making projects a little harder. I wouldn't say harder to permit, just a little more arduous in terms of the amount of paperwork that had to be filed. So the Public Utility Commission created for larger projects just a little more work on the installer's end to, you know, provide documentation about typically the environmental impacts of a rooftop array.
But not a door slamming shut off feasibility.
Right. The credits are typically, they're good for 1 year of production. So if you produce credits on April 1st, you need to use those credits by the following April 1st. Now, the nice thing is that credits can be shared with any other account in the same utility. So the case study that we're going to look at today, the town of Charlotte, they have the building that they're using, their town garage, is producing more power than the town garage's needs, but then those credits are being shared with other municipal buildings. So it can't be, those changes can't happen retroactively. They have to be proactive, but they can be once per quarter. So if you're producing a ton of power on one building and you realize, oh my gosh, we're using way more power, or we don't need as much power as we're producing at this one building, we can then let the PUC know or let the utility know and send those credits out to other accounts. For system sizes in Vermont, we have a 500 kW AC system size limit for all account holders. So that means that a town like South Burlington can only have 500 kW. So they've met their cap, and we actually did an installation a couple of years ago in South Burlington for their new city hall. That was a behind the meter installation. So that project doesn't export to the grid. So that is possible. It's a little tricky in terms of figuring out how much solar you can install so that you're not losing anything and you're using everything in real time. And with those projects, you can employ energy storage systems or just kind of size it so that it all works out perfectly. School districts have an exemption. They are, they can go up to 1 megawatt after the big consolidation that we had with districts. So school districts have a little more, they can go a little bigger. Does that all make sense? So the exciting thing is this direct pay with the Inflation Reduction Act. So typically, organizations, companies, homeowners could take advantage of a 30% tax credit off the cost of their solar array. So you purchase an array for $100,000. When you go to file your taxes, you get a $30,000 credit on your tax liability. Government entities and nonprofits could never access that before. So it made going solar much more expensive for these kinds of organizations. With the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, government entities can now take advantage of that 30%. It's not a tax credit, it's called direct pay, so it gets a little confusing, but you can get that 30% back from the federal government. I think the lawyers for common good will go into more detail on how that works. But, you know, in a nutshell, the project, you build the project, you register it with the feds before the tax return is due. With the tax return, you file the tax return and then they write a check and it comes back. I think it takes about 1 to 2 years, they're saying. So it does have to be paid up front. It would not come off the cost of the array. Although, did you guys work out something with the town in terms of your financing?
We'll talk about the
Okay.
Charlotte case study in a second. The
Yeah.
bottom line is actively, we're very interested in this segment, obviously. And what our intention is to do is to create a flexible loan program that will, you know, allow you to pay for the full cost of the project. And then, you know, then allow you to pay down the loan once you receive that, that credit back. So effectively bridging that portion of the project cost, seamlessly.
Yeah, it's great. So this is the town garage. The Charlotte Town Garage is a beautiful, beautiful project. This looks like a digital rendering, but it's actually the array that we put up there. Really, really incredible, innovative project with the help of the Energy Committee and the Charlotte Select Board. This is a fossil fuel-free building. It is heated and cooled with geothermal. It's a 129 kW DC array. It's covering about 94% of the town's electrical needs. And we're looking at about $400,000 in taxpayer savings over the warranty life of the system. So really, really cool project. The town did a lot of work to make this happen. I don't know all of the details in terms of how it came down, the whole project itself, but they built there's no one from Charlotte here, right? Okay. We built the town garage. with, did we use a bond? Do you have any idea?
Yeah,
Yeah.
both were done as bonds. So the bond bank financed the town garage, or conventional pool loan program, that also included the geothermal upgrades. And then, a few months later, we used a special program or energy efficiency program to finance the solar installation, which was also a bond, doesn't necessarily have to be under statute.
Right. And we did, sorry, do you have a question?
Just what the warranty life of the system.
25 years. It will last about 35 to 40. But typically when we're doing a pro forma, we look at just the warranty life. The townspeople did have to vote on the loan for the solar. It was separate from the construction costs, and it was an overwhelmingly positive vote. People were really, really excited about this project. Yeah, and I live in Charlotte, so it was really important to me to make it happen. I think that's it for me, in terms of just the general presentation. Are we doing questions after?
Are there questions? Well, yeah.
Did the $22,000 a year savings that covered the debt service?
It's, well, we look at the 22,000, it's utility offsets. So it should just about break even, in terms of what they're paying over the course of the life of the loan. But then once the loan is paid off, which I think it was, is it an 8-year?
Yeah, so in this particular instance, that's one of the things that's always been one of the challenges of renewable energy financing. We are modeling a program and seeking, we have a commitment letter from USDA. We expect to be able to get, I'm gonna say this, so like give me lots of patience and flexibility as we work through the process with USDA. But we expect that we'll be rolling out a program. We kind of use this as a learning experiment. That will be around 2% for 10 years. In this particular instance, it was basically break even with the debt service, but they're up quicker, because it's only a 10-year loan. So after 10 years, they have tons of upside. We're gonna work as hard as we can to get that rate as low as possible, so you realize upside sooner. And there are some ways to structure the debt such to do that kind of work through. And then we're also hopeful that this source of financing we have, we can get, there's some legislation proposed that will make it a 20-year loan, in which case it would be just like plays out. Great opportunity. But then our conventional program, you can go, it's a 25-year useful life. We can look at it that way as well.
Yeah, and once that loan is paid off, it's just free power.
Was there a reason why it was a separate bond issue from the construction?
I don't know why they chose to do that. Personally, I think that was a mistake, but I think that there were some really vocal people in town about the cost of the construction of this building. And so they were really nervous about adding an additional, whatever it was, $211,000 was the cost. In retrospect, they would have been fine. The vote passed overwhelmingly, so I don't think they would have had an issue, but there were some really vocal folks worried about the cost of the actual construction. It would have saved them some time had they done it the other way, but.
Okay, well, we're gonna have an opportunity to ask Carrie more questions afterwards. I do want to turn it now to Lawyers for Common Good. So, as you might imagine, a brand new program is rolling out at the federal level. It's gonna be super easy and straightforward. Just kidding. And all of you are used to dealing with 990s annually, like any other nonprofit. Nope, don't do that. So needless to say, there is a lot of nuance in how folks are gonna be accessing these credits. So for Lawyers for Common Good, folks, we're now ready to turn it to you. So Nestor, should I turn the controls to you?
I'd appreciate that, Michael. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you great. So just in terms of terminology, we were all thinking about this from the time the Inflation Reduction Act was passed as direct pay, because you get a direct payment back from the federal government. That term has now been changed to elective pay. So just in terms of their presentation here, something to be aware of. So I'm gonna make you host, Nestor, and we can go from there. Okay, thanks very much, Nestor. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I'd be appreciative.
Absolutely. Okay, are my slides visible now, Michael? Yeah.
Yes, they are.
All right. So my name is Nestor Perez. I'm a clean energy attorney here at Lawyers for Good Government. I'm here joined by my colleagues Kelly McRae and Jillian Banchard. They are the Clean Energy Coordinator and Director of our program here for climate change and environmental justice, as well as Franz Hochstrasser, who I think is in the crowd, physically there today. And so happy to join you all, and just I'm going to be explaining some basics of the elective pay, and I appreciate the previous presenter going over some of the basics. Just going to be reviewing the basics and the bonus adders, the filing process, filing timelines, the documentation that will be needed, and any resources on upcoming events that may be of interest to this group. So these are our programs. Like I mentioned, we are part of the Climate Change and Environmental Justice Program, but we also work across racial justice, immigration, and reproductive justice with a model of pro bono attorneys that focus on these issues, and a network of about 125,000 across the country. And as always, this is not legal advice tailored to your particular entity, general information, primarily for informational purposes, and we'll dig right in. So in terms of elective pay, as it was previously mentioned, it's a reimbursement generally of about 30%, but potentially more for the cost of the project. And it's for the first time ever available to public entities. And these are tax credits that were previously available for the private sector, but to be made available to public entities that don't have tax liability, they created the provisions in the direct pay in terms of the regulations that allow for entities to be able to get the credit back even if there is no tax liability in the form of the payment. So in terms of the tax credits that are eligible for elective pay, here are a general selection of them, but mostly we see that local governments are focused around these four. These are the particular projects that tend to be built in local entities. And so we'll dig in a bit more into some of the specifics. And of course, these slides will be shared after so that you can review more closely. And these are the parties that are eligible for elective pay. Eligible entities run the gamut of all types of nonprofits, community-based organizations, local governments, state governments, as you can see on the list. But just want to draw your attention to the parties that are excluded from directive pay currently, partnerships in particular. And the IRS actually has a proposed rule on partnerships that is up for public comment right now. And I encourage you all to submit your own comments or contact us directly if you have a particular ownership structure, partnership structure that you would like to see reflected in the final rule. And we'll be glad to include that in our letter that we are coordinating for public comment as well. And in terms of the pitfalls and the common issues that we see, misinformation sometimes, just want to clarify that the High Efficiency Electric Rebate Act rebates and the 179D efficiency upgrades are not eligible for the direct pay portion of the program, because those, of course, that's a tax deduction, and elective pay is a tax credit, and that is a fundamental difference. But still, it's 179D is something that is available to architects, engineers, and contractors, and you could potentially consider negotiating for contracts that reduce those costs on your end. And in terms of the bonus incentives that you can layer upon the basic credit, I want to make sure you know that these are the four main ones to remember: domestic content, which can be a 10% adder, or a potential haircut in some cases starting in 2024. Prevailing wage and apprenticeship, which is really only a reduction if you don't meet that requirement. And so you must meet it then to keep the 30% baseline credit. And energy communities bonus, which adds 10%, and the low income community bonus, which can add up to 10 to 20% depending on who benefits and where it's located. And so we'll go into more detail into these, but just so that you know the basics of those. And so the main three questions to ask is how do you comply, whether it adds up, subtracts, or if it adds to your project. And in terms of whether it applies, this is the main point. This is a bit of a bulky slide. I apologize for that, but it'll be worth it, especially because you'll have it after the fact. And so the main exception to the domestic content and prevailing wage project bonus adders are whether it's beyond 1 megawatt. And so many entities at the local level have asked us what constitutes one property for the purposes of calculating that megawatt exception. And the general rule, I know, I think I heard earlier from another presenter that generally we don't have projects above 1 megawatt in the Vermont area. If I'm not mistaken, I heard that, but generally it's considered one property if they're owned by a single payer at any point during construction or related taxpayers, and there's a list of the two following conditions present. And you have the list there to double check with internal counsel, but generally speaking, it depends on the degree of programmatic planning that there was, if the projects were all subject to the same financing. And so, for example, then you would need to treat them as one. So just keep in mind as you plan. And in terms of the practical guidance is if you have projects where there will be larger than 1 megawatt, in those cases, just be sure that you include domestic content requirements in your RFP bid packages so that they are complied on by the contractor, and that's not an issue on your end, and you take care of it up front. And here we include some ways to mitigate risk, but I'll let you review those for in case you have any projects that are larger than 1 megawatt, which may not be the case for folks in this group. Just a bit more detail in terms of whether it adds up, subtracts actual value from the tax credit, the domestic content. If it applies and you comply, it adds a 10% in the taxable basis. And again, this is only for investment tax credits or production tax credits. And then it subtracts if you don't comply and it's larger than 1 megawatt. It's starting in 2024 and then it escalates. So for example, in 2024, you only get 90% of the 30% total tax credit. And then in 2025, you only get 85% of the 30% tax credit. And in 2026, it's a huge loss. It's no direct pay. So just leaving some of that language in there, what constitutes start of construction for purposes of the IRS and of this provision in case it applies to your entity. And these are some more considerations to have and to request hopefully from your contractor to make sure they include indemnities, that they are complying with these provisions, and if not in the RFP package itself. If there are any exceptions, yes, potentially, but these are awaiting final guidance because we're still in the proposed rule phase. The draft guidance was released in 2023, and we're expecting that final rule at any moment. But generally, there is a statutory exception for domestic content requirements, and we include some of that language here for your review. Just a basic reminder that it does not apply to EV fleet transition, EV charging, hydrogen, carbon capture, and others. Only investment tax credit and production tax credit. All right, so here's a bit more language on those. Now this is for prevailing wage and apprenticeship. Similarly, it only applies, like I said, projects larger than 1 megawatt. And if there is no compliance, then the subtraction is of 6% for the investment tax credits or 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour, adjusted for inflation for the production tax credit. But if you do comply, you just stay at the baseline of 30%. And we include some links for ensuring compliance directly to the Department of Labor. And here is in terms of the energy community bonus tax credit. So for that bonus, you will see that it applies to 3 main project types, and that's ones that are located on a brownfield, and that's a brownfield for purposes of this bonus, and there's a specific provision on it, and you can find it there on the FAQs that are linked. It's a bit different from the EPA brownfields definition, but it heavily overlaps. Or if it's an area employed by coal, oil, natural gas, and an unemployment rate that is above the national average. And lastly, if it's a census tract in which a coal mine closed after 1999 or a coal-fired power plant has been retired after 2009. We also include a mapper from World Resources Institute that's pretty useful in determining the eligibility. And in terms of the subtraction or addition, it's really a 10% increase to the production tax credit and a 10% to the investment tax credit. So it applies if you are within an energy community. That's the baseline for this one in terms of compliance. And in terms of the low-income community bonus, there's 4 categories, and it must fit one of them. And there is more information in our fact sheet that we link to right here in this slide, but also directly on the DOE Department of Energy dashboard. But I just want to highlight that for 2023 projects, this application period already closed. It's something that you have to apply separately and before you put your project into service. So for 2024 projects, these are not yet open, but you should subscribe to the IRS e-news for updates to make sure that once the portal opens for the low-income community bonus, that you're able to apply. And this is a bit more information on how that process and approval goes, and that just a reminder again that it's something that must be pre-applied to, and it's subject to capacity allocations on the Department of Energy side, and making sure that it's before the facility is placed into service. And we have more on our fact sheet. So I'm passing it to Kelly, our clean energy coordinator, for the filing process and just more details on how that works.
Thanks, Nestor. You can go to the next slide. I may zoom a little bit here because I'm sure you're all ready for lunch, but as Nestor said, you'll get this slide deck afterwards. So this is a good reference for you. The takeaways from this slide are that each step feeds into the next. Step 4 is completing pre-filing registration with the IRS. That's really where the bulk of your early information collection is going to go. All of the things you're going to be doing on collecting addresses of solar installations, project sizes, the EIN of the project owner, all of that information collection will be done up front and go into the pre-filing registration portal. And then you'll have all the info you need to subsequently file tax forms later. Looking at step 5, we're going to talk more about filing timelines and some important things to know about fiscal year and the IRS's tax year. The important thing here is that your entity will generally be filing one 990T per tax year. So you want to make sure you're capturing all of your eligible projects on that one 990T. That's going to take some coordination between your different agencies and offices. So keep that in mind as you're planning projects. All of the other forms listed here, the 8936A and the 3800, will roll up into information that you're going to put on your 990T. So Seems like a lot of steps, but each step feeds the other. Each form feeds your 990T. And as mentioned earlier, sometimes getting the money back, which is why we're all here, does happen up to 12 months after filing. So keep that in mind as you're planning as well. Those funds can be used to seed future projects. Nestor, you can go to the next slide.
Ellie, can you address what a taxable year is?
Oh, yes. We will get in the weeds with as much time as we have. So a tax year, and it's hard for me to see you all, so feel free to speak up or shout out if there's a question we want to stop at along the way, and I'll do my best. Typically, your tax filing year would be the same as your fiscal year. For entities that have placed projects in service during early 2023, that is going to be a little complicated with the IRA. Has anybody placed projects? I'll save that for the Q&A. For projects placed in service in late 2023, you could conceivably use a fiscal year from 2023 to 2024. That will count for the IRS as the IRS's tax year of 2023. So you're going to be attending to the 2023 forms. You will be filing those forms 4.5 months after the end of the tax year in which your project was placed in service. So for an example, for a January 2023 to December 2023 fiscal year, your first filing deadline would be 4.5 months after the end of that period. It would be May 15 of 2024. There is an automatic extension that is available, adding 6 months to your timeline. That would take you to November 15 of 2024. If you have a June 2023 to July 2024 fiscal year, and that's how you want to file your first 990T, then your first filing deadline will be November 15 of 2024. And if you use that 6-month extension, that will take you to filing in May 15 of 2025. So there's 2 things here that are really important. Even if you are filing for the first time for a elective pay project in May 15 of 2025, you are filing on a fiscal year that started during 2023. You will be using the IRS's suite of forms for 2023. So keep that in mind, 2 years from now when you're in the weeds of filing your forms. That's something to keep in mind. If you're using forms for tax year 2023 and you are a first-time filing government entity, that 6-month extension is available to you without you having to do anything. There's no form to file for it. It is automatic. It is paperless. But that is only for the tax year of 2023. Beginning in 2024, there will be a new suite of forms to use. And if you do want an extension, you're going to have to file Form 8868, just like the rest of us have to do when we file personal taxes. If all that's confusing, we'll cover it in the Q&A, but for now we can go to the next slide, please, Nestor. Pre-filing registration is going to be done after you complete your project. You'll need the placed in service date for your project, and you'll take that into IRS's pre-filing registration portal. A project would be 1 electric vehicle, 1 rooftop solar installation. Each of those is considered an energy property, and each energy property is going to get its own unique ID. IRS recommends, but does not require, that you complete pre-filing registration 120 days before your filing date. We want to be really clear that that's not a hard deadline, because for anybody looking to file in May, that's already passed. It's not going to rule you out if you don't pre-register 120 days before your filing date. They do recommend you do it as early as you can. The authorized user for your entity is going to have to go create an ID.me account. And this is an important aspect of coordinating between your different offices and your entity. If anyone in your entity has already created an ID.me account, that's the one your entity has to use in the pre-filing registration portal. Otherwise, the system gets confused and the IRS isn't certain which EIN and ID.me account should be credited for a given energy property. So make sure you talk amongst yourselves, coordinate your offices, and make sure that the primary authorized entity or authorized user is making an ID.me account for your entity. And I think we can go to the next one. Nestor, I'll give this back to you. Make sure you come on.
Sorry, yeah, just to highlight there, the IDME account typically is already available to entities after ARPA funds, because typically those were accessed with the IDME. So in terms of the necessary documentation, this slide just covers what the IRS currently is asking for to prove different components of ownership, domestic content, prevailing wage, energy communities, and low-income community bonus. So they are, in terms of ownership, typically asking for purchase agreements, invoices, receipts, summaries of ownership, and other types of title depending on the property type. And in terms of domestic content and prevailing wage, we're currently waiting on the final rules to provide the specific documentation that's going to be required in the end. But for now, it's something that, like I was mentioning earlier on, you could include in your bid package and just demand that the contractor put indemnities that certify that they're complying with those. I will just leave you here for now with the additional resources that are available on our website. And I'll particularly point you to the frequently asked questions database and the Ask a Discrete Question page that you can access through these links once you have these slides, or you can Google us, where you can directly access our network of attorneys by asking your question and reviewing other questions that other entities have put in the past. And also our webinars that are coming up for more specifics on how to claim and receive payment and the best practices. The registration links will be available to you there. And yeah, just any questions that come up, we're happy to. Our director, Jillian Banchard, is also on the line. Apologies, she's a bit under the weather today, but she's available on the phone, and we can tackle any questions come up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A couple of questions from the audience for any of our panels.
I do have a question actually for Carrie, and this is, did you utilize the tax credits, or did Shabbat use the tax credits in determining their R1?
Yes,
They did, and so that was all included in the net.
yeah.
Yeah, Bonnie.
Question, I think for lawyers were good. Community asked me a question about the wage and apprenticeship. So they had an under 1 megawatt project, and they were under the impression that if they then met wage, apprenticeship, domestic content, that they could get the 30% bonus credit on top of their automatic 30% that they qualify for as an under 1 megawatt. Is that the case?
So
If they do use it, they can.
So I think that just want to make sure that our friends on the phone or on the Zoom could hear us. The question was with regard to prevailing wage and apprenticeship. What I think I saw in the presentation was that if it's under a megawatt, that that adder doesn't apply. But the adder does apply for low-income communities and energy communities. Maybe if you all could speak to that to clarify that understanding.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. This is Jillian. I'm sorry, I'm doing you all a favor by being off camera since I'm feeling very under the weather and left you in good hands with Nestor and Kelly. But the answer to that question is two different answers. So for prevailing wage, if your project is below 1 megawatt, prevailing wage requirements don't apply. So you just stay at that 30%. There's actually no bump and there's no discount. But for domestic content, if you comply and you are under 1 megawatt, you are correct. You can get the 10% bump and you can get to 40%. So you just, it's only a bonus if you're under 1 megawatt. You don't have to comply with the requirements, but if you do, you get the 10% bump.
And I would just like to add that currently domestic content is extremely challenging to comply with. We have not successfully found a portfolio of suppliers that can meet that domestic content requirement. We're hoping that that will change.
One note to add to further complicate the story, but thanks to your friends at the bond bank, we'll be trying to sort this out ourselves. There is a modest reduction in the amount of the credit if it's paired with tax exempt financing. And so one of the reasons I spoke about these alternative sources that we're seeking, one of the reasons we're pursuing that is because they are taxable sources of financing, and that would preclude the need to discount that tax credit. It's if it's combined with tax and financing, it's 85% of the 30%. But we're working to try and avoid that. Okay, any more questions? This was amazing. So I hope everybody is aware of how amazing this was. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but this really was at the forefront of anywhere in the country, understanding how this works, how can it apply to your community. And the good news is in Vermont, it's gonna be a lot easier since our projects are small. So this will, as I said, this is recorded, we'll put it online. Huge thank you to our panelists, Mike, Carrie, lawyers for good government, Franz for joining us. I'm so appreciative of your time from everyone in Vermont to the lawyers. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
We'd like to note that the information on elective pay is very difficult to come by, and lawyers for good government have done an incredible job of researching this and giving it to you in a really succinct form. I'm super impressed with their work because it is not easy.
Yeah, in that session, those annotated tax forms that they described in the presentation on the 18th will be invaluable. So we'll just blast out that webinar to everybody. All right, thank you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay.